In the Land's End district of Cornwall in England is the little church town of Zennor. In 1904 there was no village to speak of, just a few scattered farms and the odd cluster of cottages. The Zennor parish contains one of the finest ancient cromlechs, megalithic monuments like Stonehenge, in Cornwall. Near it lived alone an old woman in a small stone cottage thatched with heather. She was called by the people of the neighbourhood Aunt Joanna, and had no relations at all except for a grandniece, Rose. Rose was married to a small tradesman, a wheelwright, their family home near the church. However, she and her great-aunt were not on speaking terms. Rose had gone to live with Joanna after losing her mother at a young age. The lively young woman had heard of a dance at St Ives, which her strict Aunt Joanna had forbidden her to attend. Aunt Joanna was a devout Wesleyan and bitterly hostile to base amusements like dancing and theatre. Rose, however, stole from the cottage at night and made her way to the dance, where she had met the wheelwright. When Joanna discovered that she had left the house, she barred the door and refused to allow Rose to re-enter it. The poor young woman had been forced to sleep in the outhouse of a local farm, the next morning returning to St Ives to beg an acquaintance to take her in until she could enter into service as a maid. This did not eventuate, for when Adam Hext, the carpenter, heard how she had been treated, he at once proposed, and 3 weeks later the pair married. Since then, no communication had taken place between Aunt Joanna and Rose, who knew that her aunt was implacable in her bearing of a grudge and convinced that she had done the right thing. The nearest farm to Aunt Joanna's was occupied by the Hockins. One day, Elizabeth, the farmer's wife, noticed the bent and feeble Joanna outside her cottage and decided to give her good advice. She suggested that Joanna take on a maid to collect fuel in bad weather, shop, and care for her. By now Joanna was over 90, but still rejected the idea, particularly when Elizabeth suggested Rose's eldest daughter, a bright and pleasant girl, as the ideal lass for the job. Joanna replied that she would have nothing to do with the Hext family and intended to live to 127 like the biblical Sarah. It was after that a week elapsed when Elizabeth did not see Joanna and also noticed no smoke coming from her chimney. She and her husband Jabez walked to Joanna's cottage, where they found the cold hearth and Joanna lying deceased despite her confident prediction. Jabez suggested that they take an inventory of the cottage contents in case wicked rascals should enter and steal things. In the bedroom was an old oak chest which they opened, and to their surprise found in it a silver teapot and 6 silver spoons. Underneath lay fine and beautiful linen, while Joanna lay in thin and torn sheets on the bed. Even more surprisingly, the teapot was chock full of money, perhaps earned from showing sightseers around the cromlech. They had heard that Joanna had once been well off. Rose Hext had been Joanna's only kin, but the elderly woman's last words to Elizabeth were that she wanted nothing to do with the Hext family. Jabez immediately came in that it was their moral duty to abide by the wishes of Aunt Joanna and see that none of her savings went to the Hext family. They would take charge of the funds and provide her with a decent burial. Elizabeth added that for the last 10 or 12 years she had provided Joanna with liberal amounts of milk and butter and never charged her a penny, not aware that she was hoarding money, but assuming she could not afford to pay anything. All of Zennor declared that the Hockins were a most neighbourly and generous couple when it became known that they had taken upon themselves the defraying of the funeral expenses. Rose Hext came to their farm and offered help, but was informed of Joanna's last wishes and left dejected but not surprised. She, her husband and children dressed in black and were chief mourners at the funeral. When it came to the laying out of Joanna, Elizabeth Hocken decided that it was wasteful to use one of her beautiful linen sheets and opted for a coarse ragged one, however made sure that the elm and silver decorated coffin afforded her a dignified departure. In addition, the Hockens provided plenty of gin, cake and cheese for the wake, resulting in all-round approval of their virtuous generosity. Jabez also informed a neighbour that he would arrange for an elaborately inscribed headstone to be placed above the grave. The Hockens went right up in the estimation of the townsfolk and retired to their bed well satisfied that night. During the night, at a time she did not know, Elizabeth Hocken awoke with a start and found her husband also sitting up listening. There was a sound of feet in the kitchen, which was immediately below their bedroom. Deciding to investigate together, the pair crept out of bed and tiptoed across the room and down the stair. Cautiously they peered into their kitchen sitting room. In the moonlight they saw a figure who, there was no mistaking it, was that of Aunt Joanna, clothed in the tattered sheet. The spectre had taken one of the fine linen sheets from Elizabeth's cupboard and was smoothing it down with bony hands over the long table. The Hockens trembled with terror, daring neither to enter or retreat. Aunt Joanna then took the silver spoons from the cupboard, placing all 6 on the sheet and counting them with a lean finger. Chillingly she turned her face towards the couple, but in the shadows they could distinguish neither her features nor expression. The spectre then took the teapot from the cupboard, and now, in the moon's glow, they could see that she was moving her lips, although no sound came from them. She thrust her hand into the teapot and, one by one, withdrew the coins which, one by one, she rolled along the table. The Hockens could see the glint and shadow cast by each of the coins as she slowly rolled them into rows of 10, muttering inaudibly as if counting. The couple stood motionless observing until a dense cloud passed across the moon, eclipsing all light. Then, terrified, they both turned and fled up the stairs, bolting their bedroom door behind them. There was no sleep for them that night as they continued to hear the light rolling of the coins along the table and the click as each fell over. Apparently the deceased soul did not weary of counting the coins when all had been arranged, moving to the further end of the table and recommencing the same procedure. Not till daybreak did the sound cease, when the Hockens ventured to rise. Downstairs they found that the table had been cleared, with all coins, spoons and the sheet neatly replaced where they had been before. They wondered if the gin they had drunk at Joanna's funeral had brought on the apparition. However, precisely the same sounds were heard on the following night. Again the pattering feet, the roll and click of the coins, and again sleep impossible. Unable to contemplate a nightly haunting, the pair resolved to find some way to return Joanna's belongings. They decided to take them to the churchyard by night, place them on her grave, and watch from the church porch to see what happened. If the goods remained there until morning, they could carry them home with an easy conscience, particularly as they had spent £3 5 and 4 in burying her. They set out late that night through dark and stormy weather, timorously entering the graveyard, then heaping Aunt Joanna's goods upon her fresh grave, pinning down the flapping linen with stones in the strong wind. As they retreated to the church porch, a tearing rain descended, and what they finally saw shocked them. A lean hand emerged from Joanna's grave, dragging at a corner of one of the fine linen sheets, which, fold by fold, descended as if sucked underground in a vortex. Terrified, the couple swigged at the gin bottle they had brought, as again the spindly hand with long fingers appeared above the soil and groped about the grass before clasping the teapot. Then it groped again and gathered up the spoons. Next, up came the second hand, with a long arm that stretched along the grave to reach the other sheets, which flapped and fluttered in the wind until the hand let them go. They were swept over the churchyard wall and into the carpenter's yard next door, the Hext family's yard. One hand briefly trifled with the teapot, and some coins were flung onto the church porch. How much the couple were in no mood to estimate. They then saw the hands collect the pillowcases, roll up the silver spoons and teapot in them, and fling the white bundle into the wind and into the wheelwright's yard. A curtain of vapour rushed across the face of the moon, plunging the graveyard into darkness for half an hour, after which the Hockins observed that nothing stirred in the cemetery. They gathered up the coins and hastened home, where they lit a candle and counted what Joanna had chucked them. It was £3.5 and 4 exactly.